Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, the short form is a really fantastic place to tell some really dynamic stories. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm gonna make a stretch. I'm because you're listening. I'm assuming you do like how we do things around here. We'd love you're listening. You're here, so if you could subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and you can find us basically over at your podcast provider of choice. We're at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So you can give us a like and subscribe there as well. We would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram. Where else are we? We're on the TikTok and we're on the Letterboxd for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, the moving image at large. Because, you know, if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. Well, on this episode, we are delving into the short form. We're looking at a short film, real interesting short film, called Woman Meets Girl, which is having its world premiere at the Toronto Black Film Festival and also the Queer Screens 30th Mardi Gras Film Festival over in Australia. Sort of, it is a simultaneous event happening in two parts of the globe. But this film is called Woman Meets Girl, and it is written and directed by the one and only Murry Peeters. And it stars Enuka Okuma, and it stars Chelsea Russell. It's a simple story, but it's a really engaging story, and it all starts when it's fueled over a game of Never Have I Ever, which has a little bit of vodka involved, let's just say that. But an Annabelle, who's played by Enuka, and Tessa, played by Chelsea, challenge each other to expose their vulnerabilities. Chelsea is an 18-year-old sex worker who's homeless right now. And Enuka, Annabelle's character, Enuka plays Annabelle. She's never been with a man, and there's a really interesting dynamic here. And as that all unfolds, we see a really insane chemistry between them, and it's simple, but it's beautiful, and it's kind of amazing. And like I said, we had the chance to talk with Murry Peeters, who is the writer director and also a fantastic actor in their own right. But like I said, it is having a world premiere on two parts of the globe. So if you're going to the Toronto Black Film Festival locally, you can check it out. But if you're in Australia, you can check it out too. I think that's just cool. But if you want to, more importantly, I think you should listen to our talk with Murry, because that's even cooler. Because, again, like I said, short film is such a great proving ground for up-and-coming talent. And after seeing what Murry has done here on the big screen, I think she's in for bigger and better things, to be certain. But enjoy our talk with Murry, and if you get a chance, check out Woman Meets Girl. Well, Murry, obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you. Yes, it's all very exciting.
Now, I guess my first question is sort of walk me through sort of the origin of this story on your end. What made you want to tell this story?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I guess my journey in writing this, because the short film is essentially a piece of a feature film script that I'd written. So I must have started writing that 2018-ish, I believe. And I guess I've always sort of been drawn to stories about people who are, quote unquote, on the fringes, I suppose.
Right.
Um, and so I guess I always had it in my mind of like wanting to write a story that explored somebody who worked in sex work. And then I think I was watching this movie I think it's called Eight Women. It's like this. I want to say it's French. It might be Belgian, but it's probably French. It's in French anyway. Uh, musical, like set in the 50s, and there's like a character in there who's this sort of like this typical kind of old maid or whatever, and is like, lived at home her whole life and is never married and like all of these types of things. And just watching that movie, I was like, oh, that's also an interesting character. It would be kind of interesting to pit these two characters together in a story. And so I think that was sort of where the jumping off point was.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
All right. So like bigger idea, proof of concept, but then you found a story inside the story. I like that. All
Yeah.
right. No, I mean, I guess walk me through like finding the right actors because I mean, obviously, this is this is a piece that requires a certain degree of intimacy and just sort of emotional sort of awareness. Like for you as an actor, was it interesting to cast other actors?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think I think the challenge of casting is that as the writer, I definitely have it in mind of like the character is this particular way or these lines are said in a particular way or whatever. And as an actor, I think we're always kind of told that like at the end of the day, the people on the other side of the table don't really know what they want and they're waiting for you to kind of show it to them, right? Um, so, approaching the casting sessions by being open-minded towards like what the actors are going to bring to the part and allowing myself to be surprised by their performances, but then also being like, no, but this is also the vision that I have for it and finding kind of like, I guess, the balance between the two things. So Enuka Okuma, she was the first to come on board and like she's a good friend of my producers. And I've been a huge fan of her work for ever, like I grew up watching Rookie Blue and stuff and knowing that we're both also from Vancouver. Uh yeah, I've always been in deep admiration of her. And so having a chance to sit down and have a conversation with her and getting her take on the character and stuff and really seeing that she had like an understanding of what it was I was trying to do was super exciting. So I was like thrilled to have her on board. And then Chelsea we found through a casting session. Um, and she just had this there's like a there's an unpredictable quality about her
Right.
that felt very much in the character.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think that we were all like myself and Anuka and our other producer Adria were all very much like drawn to her immediately.
For
Yeah.
sure. No, I mean this is such a psychological piece in many ways. I mean, I'm curious for you. Uh do you like are you the type of director who wants to sort of a writer who wants them to be precious to the words on the page, or can you allow them a little bit of rope to sort of play with it a bit?
Oh gosh, that's really funny. I feel I feel like I'm a little bit of two minds with that, because like coming up as an actor, it was I've always kind of been of the mind when I'm acting of like, so long as I get the general gist of what you're saying, I feel like that's sort of what's most important and it needs to feel good in my body and like, and at the end of the day, as much as I'm going to try to be word perfect, it's going to come out how it's going to come out. And like I said, so long as it's in the same intention, I feel like that's all that matters. But once I started moving into writing and like especially I think being on my first show and seeing the actors perform the work and stuff, feeling a little bit of that flip in me of being like, I spent so long writing this, so just say what I fucking wrote.
I believe that for sure. No, I mean, I'm curious because again, this is the kind of piece where it's there is that psychological nature and there is that sort of tension. And I mean, I'm curious because in many ways this feels like a very I mean, I'm trying to find the right word, but almost sort of emotionally exploratory. Like definitely on both ends of the character. I mean, for you as a storyteller, like what is it about sort of those ideas that really compels you to sort of put something like this onto the screen?
Oh, I guess everything, like all the things that I tend to like write and gravitate towards, I think all sort of have a similar theme about them, like sort of about characters figuring out who they are and like identity and understanding like how you fit in the world and that type of thing. And so I definitely very much see that within this piece. Um, and I definitely think of these two characters as almost being two sides of the same coin and just really trying to find the moments where we see that and the moments where we see uh, the differences. Um, yeah.
Well, no, I like that because I mean, in many ways, as much as both of these characters in one way they're both open books, but on the other end, they both have things that they're holding back. And I love
Mhm.
that you just mentioned sort of the moment and appreciating the moment because to me, that's what this was. This wasn't necessarily about, a self-awakening or discovering, one's sexuality or this, that, or the other. It was about just sort of appreciating the moment and sort of being allowed to exist in that. And I mean, that feels like something that we don't get enough of on screen. It's all about sort of the grander picture, about moving forward. Like it's never about the moment. And I'm kind of curious, what is it about the moment where magic, I think to me, magic happens in the moment. It's not in the grander sort of
Mhm.
scope of the story. The magic is really in sort of being able to appreciate that moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in the piece itself, Tessie kind of has a line to that effect that like the purpose of life is just about appreciating the moments and
Yeah.
like that it doesn't necessarily need to add up to anything beyond
Yeah.
what it is in that moment. Um, yeah, and I think, for myself, I think it's also how I'm trying to like reframe how I'm approaching life and that like at the end of the day, because you really don't know what the future holds, it's hard to pin too much of anything on any particular outcome,
For sure.
and just trying to find the appreciation of like, it's that thing of like dogs and children, who are just so present in
Right.
any given moment. How do you recapture that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm curious for you, like, has writing and directing always been in the offing? Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time you've directed. So, I mean, I got to imagine that was a different experience, sort of moving to that side of the camera.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think, because as a kid, acting was always sort of where I saw myself, and I think it's always sort of been my first love. So I don't think directing is something that I ever really saw myself doing until recently or until after getting into writing. Like even writing as a kid was not something that I saw myself doing, but I guess it was an interest that I developed in the last few years. Uh, and now there's just like a completeness maybe of the ownership over the story and the
Right.
vision by also being able to um direct it. Yeah.
Is there anything in the process maybe you learned that maybe you didn't expect to learn? So now that you're sort of at the tail end of it.
Oh, uh I guess it's not necessarily something that I didn't know, but it's like, the difference between knowing and like actually knowing,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right.
Of just being less precious about things and being willing to just let things go on the day, which I mean, I think as a writer, I think I was sort of a little bit more in that place of like, when I'm writing things, I'm never really against just scrapping everything I've written and starting over. But I guess there was something along the process of like feeling as though I had a complete script or whatever and wanting to have sort of that locked vision to then bring into the directing aspect that felt maybe at the outset of like, no, this is the way that it has to be because this is how I envisioned it and whatever. But then, allowing the openness, sort of what you were saying earlier about like letting the actors kind of have their own ownership over the words and the dialogue. And there were definitely some lines in the finished film that were improvised by the actors that I ended up keeping in, and things that were said during rehearsal that I then put into the script or like modified and put into the script. Um, yeah, so I think the biggest learning is just like stay flexible,
The,
and
the,
I
the
think that's
creative
sort of where
process
magic
is
lives.
always fluid, right?
Yeah, yeah,
No, I mean, I
yeah.
guess that dovetails into the grand question. I mean, it's the silly one, but I mean, you know the old joke. Are you the actor who wanted to direct, or were you the director who was acting and then finally sort of broke out and got to make their own story?
Ooh, gosh, I don't know. I think, oh, that's a tough one. It sort of feels like a little bit of both, I guess, because I definitely still kind of see myself as an actor first and always kind of approach the way that I tell story and the characters' development and like all of that from like a very actor character first point of view. But obviously, I have a lot of stories in myself that I want to tell and want to share. So,
Well, and it feels like the opportunities now are more open for people to to be the hyphenate, to be the actor, writer, director, as opposed to maybe than they were 10 years ago. Just given the demand for content and the demand for stories out there in the world. I mean, I'm kind of curious from your perspective on that. Is it harder? Is it easier to develop stuff these days, or is it always a journey?
I definitely think it's always a journey. I also feel like I've been in the industry like relatively recently, so I don't necessarily know like to be able to like fully speak to like how it was 10, 15 years ago. Um, but that being said, I also think that it's both easier and harder. Easier in the sense that like sorry, that like equipment and opportunities are maybe a little bit more accessible. There's the internet, you can look things up, you can figure things out, that type of thing. But that also means that there's so many more people in the pool with you, right? So being able to stand out is maybe a little bit harder. And because, as you said, there is so much content too, that it's like that extra challenge of like, okay, but how do you really make something that's different?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, too, isn't that sort of the goal, sort of the ideal goal for sort of the pool to be democratized? So, voices, be they, white, black, gay, straight, trans, whatever, let the talent come through, which is at the end of the day what it's supposed to be about, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Well, you know what, Murray? I mean, I think with this film, I think you've definitely made a fantastic sort of really psychological piece that will engage people and get people talking. I mean, and I can't wait for people to see it at the festival. But just thank you so much for the time today. And again, congrats on the film.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.